lies and politics. Informative, educative, and analytical. Getting to the real issues that affect an ordinary individual in areas of leadership, governance, social, and economy. The truth, the lies, and politics.
A very good evening to you and welcome to The Truth, Lies and Politics. My name is Paul Ekurot-Eke and this is a dynamic space where ideas collide, opinions ignite, and perspectives are challenged, and we amplify diverse voices on the table. I do invite you to a place where we conversate on ideas that affect you and I on a daily, and we also have an opportunity of you being a part of our conversations here on Spirit TV, that is at Spirit TV UG on X, Facebook, and YouTube. Together, you and I can bridge the gaps in our communities, in our societies through the information that we share, and you have the opportunity to make the decision. Ladies and gentlemen, I do invite you to the place where the conversation begins. This is yet another time where we have interesting conversations on issues of today. Now, before we do jump into me introducing the guests that we have in studio, we do have a message for you. Tonight on The Truth, Lies and Politics. Are the national resistance movement's founding ideals still relevant today? Talk about patriotism, Pan-Africanism, and socio-economic transformation. Once a rallying cry of a revolutionary movement, but do they still speak to the realities of modern Uganda? Now, with shifting global politics, evolving economic dynamics, and changing societal values, are these principles still effective in solving Uganda's pressing challenges? Or have they become relics of a past era? Well, join our panel of sharp minds as we unpack the ideology of the NRM, its roots, its evolution, and its place in today's political landscape. Only on The Truth, Lies, and Politics. Stay informed, stay engaged. And we do welcome you back to The Truth, Lies and Politics. My name is Paul Ekurot-Eke, the show host. And before I introduce my guests, we've been having an interesting, I don't know that to say interesting, but things that happened within the week. As we speak, I think yesterday there was a strike in Chambogo University where students were striking against the hike in fees. If you've been putting ear to the ground to the situation that is happening in Tanzania, we have yet other opposition political party leaders being arrested and a whole political party banned in Tanzania. But I think the news that has taken the world by storm is the passing of Pope Francis. And this happened right on Easter Monday. And lots of news and condolence messages and everything flowing in. And we definitely have an opportunity to say a thing or two about that on the show. Now, with me on the show is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, who is in the party leadership. He had, I think, taken a siesta from the show for a show. He's been away for a while. But we're glad to have you on the show, sir. Welcome back, and it's good to have you on the show, Joseph. UPC party.
I cannot take a siesta from these jobs. Maybe you guys may be
we're
busy elsewhere and with other people, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You had me quarrel with some friend of ours in broadcasting before we came to air.
Yes.
That is part of a national network.
That is intentionally.
No, I don't want to say intentionally.
Okay.
That finds it difficult to host Ochieno on mainstream national things. And I want to tell them officially.
Yes. And they're watching. The beauty is that they are watching.
It's absolutely your loss.
Yes.
But I know the loss is not about you. The loss is about the loss that you're causing to the people of Uganda.
Okay.
Because before I came on air, I was just talking to friends from another global media network on the question of U.S. policy on Africa, impacts on Ethiopia and many other places. I don't want to go too much detail. So if I can have a conversation that affects Africa, where Uganda is just about a passerby, and somebody in the space of Kampala think they do me a favor by seeking my opinion. No, I have my time for you.
Yes.
I have my time for other networks.
Yes.
But also when I'm off the media, I'm substantially engaged with the young people.
Yes.
And also upside down and up around the country,
yes.
with the citizens of this country, trying to help wake them up. Of course, today we were busy lamenting about the mess that NRM has caused in Toro, breaking up our big Bukedi and now turning the people of Toro up and down and against themselves. And then you find a few individuals selfish in politics, trying to do the division like sweets to serve a particular purpose, and they don't think about 10 years from today, they don't think about 50 years from today, they don't think about 100 years from today. But that's the mess in which we are. It's the mess that when I'm not on your screens here,
I'm trying to
help
settle.
contribute elsewhere.
Wow, thank you. And I know that that conversation will come back in our conversation later on today. About the Pope, do you have anything to say before the passing of the Pope Francis?
I'm a Catholic.
Yes, sir.
And UPC. UPC hosted the first Pope on the African continent in 1969. People politicize these things, but I want to give it context. That beyond the fact that we had Uganda Matters, the Pope in 1969 found it decent that we had an established government in Uganda led by a Protestant prime minister stroke later president. But Uganda, which was a sea of stability and a sense of democracy in the sub-region, and where there's freedom of faith and worship. And so we were quite privileged to do that. Of course, the big picture is one of President Obote and Mama Mira receiving the Pope, and many other people. So that said, fast forward, of course, we received the last Pope here in, about 10 years ago. So unfortunately, he's passed on. I never got the opportunity to meet him. A fantastically a progressive Pope, as many others would say. Of course, condolences to myself and all other Catholics. But the Pope is the most important, usually global religious leader, usually the most respected, partly because of the size of the church and the influence of the church, but generally semblance and voice of reason. Of course, he was always pushing for peace and stability. He always gave lectures. You see how he swayed Salva Kiir and others. But the poor guy, the guy is rested, but of course the enclave will take place, and then there will be black smoke, and we will continue.
But leadership,
beyond that,
Black smoke or white smoke? Black smoke or white smoke?
Black smoke. There'll be smoke. Black smoke and white smoke. But I say black smoke very deliberately.
I see where you're going on that one. But yes, actually on one of his last appearances, I think he talked about the war in Gaza and Israel and all. But thank you very much for that message.
So since it's a concluding remark on that, it's extraordinary. I see some people in social media who talk about these guys who reign for life, and the African rulers, now 4 of them, who've managed to beat...
To see about three or four popes.
And then you begin to wonder, no wonder some of them, you know, those with kingdoms and those without, and those whose children think they're now kings, they begin to think that their parents are deputy Jesus. But in Jesus' name, my country is not controlled by... No, Jesus is in charge, and Muhammad is in charge in the respective way. But politically in State House, there is no circumstance under which I will bow down to any deputy Jesus.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Cheno, for that message. We do move on to Mr. Charles Romushana, who is a political analyst and also a former spy on the show. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the show. As you do share, you can also add into your voice into the passing of Pope Francis.
The Almighty God of all creation is great, and above all, is exceedingly merciful. I have 2 elements. The first one is that talk about the poor. Yes. The Bible does not emphasize the poor
love for the poor. The commandment of God, the way Jesus Christ summarized them into two. Love your God and love your neighbor, the way you love yourself. You would have qualified the neighbor to be the poor. Then he's asked about the neighbor, the good neighbor, and we have the parable of the good Samaritan. The poor are not for the pleasure of the rich. That you should be seen, that you go to help the poor, you go to give the poor for you to derive pleasure out of it. They talk about you. That's why Jesus Christ commands that if one arm gives, the other shouldn't know. You remember that?
Yes.
Because they are not there for your pleasure. But means muntu wa wansi is down on earth. He helps the poor. No, it's I don't think that there is a people that God created, then deprived them so that they are a source of pleasure to the others. Of course, I'm mindful of the parable of the rich man and the poor Lazarus. But there is another thing which is doctrinal. One, that we don't own anything on earth, including our own lives. Our lives and including death belong to God. The air we breathe in isn't ours. So what do you own on earth? Now, if you don't own anything, how do you begin classifying another one as not having? Because you don't own. Everything on earth belongs to God. Yes, they were made for us, sustain us, and then we pass on, others use them. You are not going to go with Lake Victoria. Yes. So, and into the soil you will return because you are soil in the first place. So how then do you begin saying, me I have, others don't have? Where do you get that? Where do you get what you give? Because it doesn't belong to you.
Yes.
Now then on the Pope.
Yes.
The greatest is the most least
Among
in the kingdom of God.
Yes.
Huh? If you are the greatest there, then you are the most least here. Why? Because you are the servant. The second one, and when you are a servant, it is you are not serving to be appreciated by those you serve. No. Yes. You serve to be appreciated by the one who deployed you. So if you are a servant in my household, if you are a servant in my party, it's not my guests to appreciate you.
Yes.
No, it's me, the host. So you are a servant of God, and you serve God's people. Therefore, you don't expect appreciation from the people you serve. Your appreciation is with God, the one who deployed you. And on death, God was in the beginning. Actually, God was there before the beginning, and God will be there after the beginning, after the end. The rest of us are in the middle there.
We are flowers, the Bible says.
So then why katwe pankachi? Why are we arrogant? Why are we proud? Why don't we humble ourselves?
Wow.
Jesus Christ is risen.
Yes.
Why don't we then focus where he is? Why do we focus where he is past? Because was with us here, went to the world of the dead, conquered death, and is risen. Yes. So why then don't we focus on where our Master, our Lord is? And lastly, I'm weak. I don't know about you. So I cannot begin discussing another person's weaknesses and strengths. But even Peter, Saint Peter, whom he is the heir of Saint Peter.
He is
the heir of Saint Peter, right? The Pope is the heir,
apparently,
of Saint Peter. But Peter was also too weak. One, Peter chased away Jesus.
Denied him 3 times.
No. Just when Jesus preached and then asked Peter to put the nails and caught fish, Peter told Jesus, "Get away from me, I'm a sinful person." The second one, Peter ran away and the other disciples, they hid. You remember?
True. Yes.
Yes, they hid. The third one, if that it was a centurion, there is some gentleman whose grave was used to bury Jesus.
That is Joseph of Arimathea.
Yes. Assuming he hadn't, where were you going to bury Jesus? And yet he had been with the likes of Peter. This one had prepared a grave, but none of his disciples had prepared a grave. Yet he had been telling them, I will die, I will resurrect.
Right.
None of them thought about a grave. It is one who was not among the 12,
Right.
who was one there and two who provided the grave. And then finally, he told them, I will resurrect after 3 days. What was difficult with counting the 3 days? At least go and check what our teacher has been telling us, whether he has resurrected. But none of them, it is the women.
Who went there,
I don't know whether those are the part of the prostitutes. I don't know whether they were among those, but I know usually to be with prostitutes but I'm not very sure about this category of women. But what I know is that it is the women who went and checked the grave and came to inform Peter and the others. But these ones, the Josephs, he had been telling, I will resurrect after 3 days. They had forgotten. Yes. So I'm saying we are all very, very weak. For my case is worse. I'm really very weak, I concede. But even the one who inherited the throne, the chair from Jesus, was much weaker. But we are by grace.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles, for that. Thank you very much, Joseph, for that message. We do now just dive into our conversation this evening. And, you know, when you think about the national resistance movement, it's been in leadership since 1986 and under President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. And it's anchored on 4 ideological principles and developed in response to Uganda. They say 4 major principles, I could say.
That excludes 1986 to probably up to 2000 something. Because these ones are new.
All right.
The original one is anchored on 10 points program.
Okay, let's have
it had no principles.
Let's have this one, and then you will. Yes, but that I've been told that it's been crunched into the 4. All right, and these 4 is patriotism, Pan-Africanism, democracy, socio-economic transformation. You know, all fit in there. And I would like to just think about the person who is down, the person who stays in Wise, the person who stays in the village deep down. When you talk about these 4 things, because I know you'll tell us about the turning points into, but when you talk about these 4 things, does this individual really understand or relate to them after the 40 years of NRM being in leadership? I know we're waiting for our other guest, Honorable Tink. I hope he arrives in time. But I would like to post this to Charles because, yes, we will start from your side.
So what do you want me to discuss? The lie?
Which is the lie? Which is the lie? Because as an analyst, when you say the lie, someone say, which is the lie?
You see Mr. Museveni is not a revolutionary. And therefore the NRI is not a revolutionary group.
What
because for you to have that's why he has ever told you his was a revolution. Because for you to have a revolution, you must have revolutionaries.
Okay.
He is not a Democrat. He is not a Democrat.
So he's not a revolutionary, not a Democrat.
Of course, a revolutionary, again, is also not a Democrat.
Okay.
Yes. But a revolutionary is honest.
Okay.
Will not lie around those tenets, those huge lies of yours of democracy. So Mr. Museveni is not a revolutionary. The NRA is not a revolutionary
Neither is it
organization.
A Democrat. Then what is it?
Mr. Museveni is not a Democrat. And therefore, the NRA cannot be a Democrat. Cannot be democratic.
Cannot be a democracy.
It's not. Yeah, it's not period on democracy. But Mr. Museveni is a heir to a historic mission of the national, historic mission, but that historic mission is steeped in spirituality and mysticism. We discussed Sabrai mysticism. We've discussed that before. The Bachwezi, the reincarnation of the Bachwezi that was 500 years ago. Now, so what we would need to interrogate then is the historic mission. What was in Matthew Chikire's house? The meeting that took place
At Chikire's house.
at Matthew Chikire's house. You can look for Mzee Emmanuel Kafuneza. It could be among the 7 members who sat there. It could be now I think there are only 2 survivors, him and Mr. Emmanuel Kafuneza.
Okay.
But he's there in Yawichiwan. Go and have a conversation with him. So you will notice that in their conversation, there was nothing like establishing democratic rule.
In that conversation.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And even in that conversation, there was nothing like NRA. You get? NRA, according to their own story, comes after the merger with Rure. That's when they formed the NRA. So the NRA was formed later. The NRA and then later on what you call that movement was formed later as a vehicle for military purposes.
Okay.
So now the question then is, was this military to establish democracy? The military was to seize the state.
Okay, yes.
And in seizing the state, they seized the people's sovereignty. So the NRA usurped the sovereignty of the people of Uganda in 1986 and promised a transition after 10 years. 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, it came to 10 years in 1995. So the fundamental question is, have we done the transition? So they have never given you their historic mission. No, they gave you the program. Because they are very deliberate. It's a 10-point program. Program means what you are going to do. You are going to do when you do what? So when you seize power, is then you will have
these things to follow.
Yeah, but that's not the mission. Because in that 10-point program, you will not find the seizure of Rwanda. The demolition of the Rwandese state, of Habyarimana, the seizure of the capture of Rwanda, the establishment of the Tusame in DRC, in Zaire, the overthrow of Mobutu, and then the seizure of Central Africa, and then this mayhem you are seeing in South Sudan. You don't find all those in the 10-point program. Therefore, I can argue, safely so, that the 10-point program is therefore a deception.
So where does,
now,
when President Museveni is speaking, he's talking about ideology, ideology, ideology. If most of his speeches, he talks about this important phrase, ideology. Where does
but you see, I don't say he's in deception. I wouldn't want to say that, but I would want to say he's doing it's a diversion. It's an intelligence diversion. that don't go for what he says, go for what he does not say.
Okay.
And you can easily pick what he does not say from his actions. So when you see him go to fight to secure Salva Kiir, then the question is why? So when you see him in Somalia with Farah Aidid, and now later on after the Islamic courts, and is in Somalia, why? Okay. Therefore you see him from his actions and then start reading him.
From those actions.
From his actions rather than from the slogans he picks. Because I've told you these slogans are new. Now, the initial political wing of the NRA, he called it a system. But then it was also not a system. And I remember I was among those, actually I could have been the lead.
In that system?
No, in asking for the definition of the movement. Yes, I remember I held my ground, said yes, I will support the movement, but what is it? And
did you get an answer?
And Elia Kategaya failed to explain to us what the movement system. Because you see, you know a system, the security system. So if you're talking about the security system, you will have the arteries, you will have the heart, you will have the veins, you have, I mean, the blood, it's there. You get, if you say excretion system, so if you say movement system, what is it?
What is it?
And Mr. Elia Kategaya, then National Political Commissioner, failed to explain to us what it was. But you had emphasis on what ought not to be done when it was in place than what ought to be done. It was legislation by prohibition.
What were some of those things that were?
Yes, that political parties shall only operate at headquarters.
Okay.
They will be in abeyance, but at headquarters. They will not hold rallies, which they don't hold. They will not open party branches, neither will they do delegates conferences. You get? So, so in other words, Mr. Museveni then was saying, participate, but don't organize. You get?
How so?
So and you can't do this the sovereign. If they are the sovereign and you are a democrat, you cannot stop them from organizing. Now you are not allowed. Izina has now put a police unit at every sub-county. If you are not part of his house, his organization, you will not be able to mobilize in a sub-county because there is police. By the way, even he has also stopped them.
His very own.
Yes, you are now going to be addressing candidates' meetings. They will organize for you, then you will address them during primaries. You know how it's going to. So you won't even go to mobilize, except if you're extremely very close to him and you are his most favorite. But if you are not, they disperse you. So when you check his conduct, he is allergic to democracy. Because democracy presupposes checks to power. Yes. And then it has other tenets, rule of law, independent judiciary, free media. All those are not there. So you therefore cannot look at those. Now, the socio-economic transformation, transform a people. What model? Because you see, are you believing in the elevation of the whole, or you are believing in the elevation of some to elevate the others? His model is the construction of a genetically modified middle class, which is ethnic.
That's the genetically modified one, right?
Which is ethnic, and is empowering it through corruption. Yes, they planned the state. And it's around here. You go and check the list of the Bagagga. Now you know they have those titles.
Yes.
And then you had the pastoral group.
The pastoral group that
yes, in the ranching scheme, the ranching restructuring scheme, the land that belonged to the state, they seized it. Now it belongs to individuals. Those ranches. The other day was at. They had gone to play for the late Rutamwebwa in Rushere. I think Rutamwebwa got 3 to 5 square miles of land. Now the land is property. The land that used to belong to pastoralists, to the nomads,
Now is
a property of specific individuals, and is among those that says, I can't use the word looted. They have square and square miles of land. So in other words, they have dispossessed the people of their land. So you cannot say you are going to transform a population when your land policy, when you still have land grabbing, where Mr. Museveni now goes to a village and, becomes a judge.
Yes. I would like to just put a point that, because we are coming back to the point of social economic transformation, but I would like to hear from Joseph. And Joseph, you've heard what Charles has said, you know, but from your own understanding, from your own perspective, with these principles and the people you've interacted with, do the people on ground understand, do they see these things happening in their own lives, in their own homes, in their own communities? Or this is whitewashed, it's just on paper? Patriotism, Pan-Africanism, democracy, socio-economic transformation.
If you heard Charles correctly.
Yes. You seem to be siding.
No. You should be asking my opinion on the submission of Charles.
You can put an addendum.
Because
okay.
There is absolutely nothing that Charles said which is untrue. When he invited me here and I saw the topic, I thought, what another 2 hours opportunity for NRA to beat the drums and chest thump. Obviously, granted, one of your guests is an NRA person.
Yeah.
And the disclaimer is that while I agree 100% with Charles, maybe the NRA will not have a response. But it doesn't matter. Because from your question, all that Ugandans who kneel for Mr. Museveni and his bunch, you know, you should just go for the evidence. NRA doesn't have an ideology, except the attempts that Charles has put forward on seeking to establish what really the whole thing is. I am completely tempted to believe that Mr. Museveni and his project nearest nuanced as suggested perhaps by his son as the Bachwezi establishment. I don't know when Ugandans are going to wake up to this reality. I know some who gave Museveni cassava and matoke in some parts of Uganda may still be enjoying sleep. But sleep over 40 years is actually criminal sleep, because that is over and above the Bible sleep of 40 years. So I hope this is a critical moment. Number two, that ideology, political ideology, are supposed to be sets of values and ideals that contextualize and represent, in the broadest sense, political and economic programs of political parties and organizations. And like Charles Ebley said, you can't find it anywhere in any documentation, anything that would consistently present as that. In any case, you know, NRA leaders will say that actually, when you ask the ideology, they'll say they are multi-ideological. So, in that UPE English, I don't know which dictionary basically explains that.
The multi-ideological.
But like you said, you brought in this new 4 concepts that I don't stick in my head.
The 4?
Because,
yes.
Because...
You still remember the 10 points?
It's not that I remember them.
Yes.
No, they're actually very irritating. You know, when you have Z sounds of lies and irritation and cheek, there they go again. That is basically what it is. Because they're absolute nonsensical lies. Pan-Africanism, even if actually NRM was an organized political party with sets of values, you can't be a Pan-Africanist and invade an African nation. So NRM invaded Rwanda and occupied it. Invaded Burundi and occupied it. Invaded Congo and occupied it. Effectively is in charge of South Sudan. Invaded Somalia and occupied Somalia on behalf of, in all those cases, for specific chauvinist interests, maybe the Chwezi lineage.
Not on behalf of any other person
But,
apart from
no, and almost operationally as agents of imperialism. You can't be a Pan-Africanist and you'll establish what Pan-Africanism is all about. So NRA at no time would they associate themselves with that, because Pan-Africanism is completely anti-imperialist. And Pan-Africanism, beyond the boundaries of the geographical Africa,
yes,
is about the identity of the African personality.
the sense of Ubuntu.
If you no, in terms of identity, personality in terms of values, I mean, Ubuntu is about the values, but in terms of personality. So if it's really very much about the African identity, then a Pan-Africanist that has broken up Ugandan nationhood and turned the properties of the Republic of Uganda into individual properties, which Pan-Africanist state or groups of people will thrive that 60% of the economy is controlled by foreigners? Which Pan-Africanist can give African land for free to do their stranger friends' interests? Which Pan-Africanist will dispossess an African state and communities over their land to give others? Which Pan-Africanist actually says concentration camps within their own nation states? Which Pan-Africanist would do a Pineti? Which Pan-Africanist would do this funny thing in Atia?
Concentration camps?
In northern Uganda, northern eastern Uganda,
Okay.
which NRA did.
Right.
It was actually effective, according to Laro Tunu, genocide. Which Pan-Africanist? And so, if you took those alone, without the very
These
detailed
other
detail of
details,
Charles,
yes.
you know, what Pan-Africanist? And patriotism, which patriot? Which class do you take an African to teach them to love, to be themselves? No. You make an African proud of the African identity.
Yes.
All you need to do is to make a Ugandan proud of being a Ugandan citizen. By what? Rule of law, guaranteed security, dealing the basic issues in terms of health, education, and everything else. But now, you want to teach a class in Nagongera? When the other day came from Nagongera, and what did you tell a child of 6 who dies from cerebral Mandere today? What do you tell that same class of Mahanga Primary School, the children that I saw? Their classmates, confused little children. Their 6-year-old friend died, is being buried. What trauma? Is that criminality, or what patriotism are you teaching? And do you know what the grandfather of the child says? All the medical staff really tried, by the way, according to him, and of course they did. But do you know what? There was no medicine in Nagongera, no medicine in Tororo. I think to their credit, one of the doctors even said he was willing, even checked, tried to trace for the medicine in Bali. Medicine for treatment
of cerebral malaria.
Is it criminality, or are you saying you're the headmaster of teaching patriotism? Why would any of the citizens in the situation claim what pride, which is basically what national pride and ownership would they have?
Yes.
You're a Democrat here in Kawempe. You're a Democrat who breaks systems, and you claim PDM, and you take 200 million, allegedly, the economics from the bush, 200 million in the name of PDM, So you lend 1 million Uganda shillings, that must be paid back. But you give 100 million shillings to dubious fellow thief legislators to bribe them to do what? Amongst others, to say thank you for us to continue looting, because part of our job is that.
Wow.
But in part
Yes,
because
yes.
the other is that we want to change the legislation so that we continue breaking people's legs in Machindi, like we broke Kizabesi's. What democracy? What nonsense. If you then live down there, then you go to the so-called 10-point program, My Food, from number top to the bottom, systematically all of them Z, Z, Z. NRA has been the most organized political theft and failure in this country since independence. And the sooner Ugandans woke up to those realities, the better. And I can tell you that as of today, when the people who Bukedi have been broken up, and people are basically fighting, and for you, I know you're Nijakite, you know? And people are basically beginning, people have gone that cheap, that base,
unfortunately,
to begin to say who's who and whose grandfather's who, because of Mr. Museveni and his system.
Mr. Joseph, you have, and I know at some point there was a bit of an emotion right there, raised there. When you speak about that, I would like to give you an opportunity, because when you say there is no ideology, I am then meant to think then there is something like an ideology. Now, you are from the UPC party. I'm giving you an opportunity to at least now say, since you don't see that within the NRM, can we transpose and show us, okay, for UPC, what are some of those things?
Of course not. What the only political party with the established ideology in this country is Uganda People's Congress. And by the way, my narration in terms of response was not political. It was scholarly. I'm a scholar. So quite clearly, I wish there's some, of course, some NRA guys, once they've got PhDs, they boast. So once they've got some deputy degrees, they boast. No, let's have a scholarly conversation.
Yeah.
Let's not do it Google.
Yeah.
Let's go to a library. Of course, let's go to Makerere University Library that UPC built, but the NRA has broken it up. Or maybe let's go to the Library of Congress in the Americas, but maybe let's use the dollars that half the remains of what they've stolen, you know, through classified funds. And let's go and have 1 week and have a conversation, scholarly conversation of what an ideology is.
Yes, yes.
So they will
break
not.
it down.
So my point is, even if you Google it, you know, it does not meet. But number two, then if you do that, even if you think sort of they meet some element of criteria,
yes,
and then you benchmark, you could use the word, this is the list, this is the interpretation, this is the definition, this is the listings, and Google says these are
the pointers, the pointers. Yes.
It will not apply. We are a social democratic political party, basically. We're a socialist political party, Uganda People's Congress. We are a progressive left political party. We are a Pan-Africanist political party. We are part of Socialist International political party. Okay? So I'll tell you that from an Africanist perspective, I can give you a track record. From our response in Rwanda, as a political party before coming to government in 1959, we were able to take a position and say that, look, there's genocide in Rwanda, but we shall, as a political party in pre-independence Uganda where the colonists were ruling, we say UPC will take a position on the emancipation and the saving of the situation in Rwanda. And as a political party, the leading voice in Uganda and the British, this is our position. So we supported the rescue of the situation in Rwanda where genocide was taken away. That's how we enabled the Batusi in Rwanda to get into Uganda, and actually the so-called progressive refugee policy for which Uganda is so-called being praised
UPC
was our foundation. So from an Africanist perspective, so you can see what
that was a progressive party.
So if you take a Pan-Africanist view, then you will see our position on liberation struggle in South Africa, but also globally.
So during UPC's time, there was no attack on any country on anything.
It's not even about during, but basically the position that you stand for, the position that you stand, whether or not you're in government. So you don't necessarily have to be in government to do in practice, you know. and our views and our relations with the rest of the other predominantly left political parties, including membership of Socialist International, which is a grouping of political parties whose values are that. And you're absolutely right. For us, we rescue situations rather than to go ahead and take sides with Salva Kiir. So if you look at our position with in Sudan from the Numeri times and to the Nyanya conflict, our position in Egypt, our position in the Middle East conflict, completely consists and not contradictory.
Yes.
Now,
What
if you come to our economic blueprint away from there, the so-called 10-point program, you bring in also a common man's charter.
Yes. I was going to ask you for your viewpoint or what UPC would have done for the conflict in South Sudan.
We would be peacemakers rather than taking one side to break.
President Museveni is not a peacemaker?
No. He's a net contributor to that.
Okay.
He's a net contributor to that. Museveni, we know from the time of the death of Saddam, the death of John Garang. Garang's death is unestablished. There are some rumors and speculations which are unestablished that we don't want to talk about. From our perspective, we say these are things that it's Milton Obote said that what concerns all must be discussed by all. So we should be able to have this conversation. But beyond that, it's quite clearly that there is, and again, even Charles and I, the two of us in this kind of conversation, there are still certain things that we reasonably don't want to go ahead and put down there because there's certain things, lines you don't want to cross for a reason of civility. So we are reasonable people. So if, from what NRA is doing in Sudan, Museveni's relation with Salva Kiir, the speculations and stories about dollars exchanging hands and people being paid by dollar, mercenary armies in Sudan, let's say you go into the question of in Somalia, where Mr. Museveni uses Ugandan soldiers as property to go ahead and die on behalf of Anglo-America, which Charles is talking about. UPC wouldn't do that.
One would argue, though, that would be a foreign policy of a country.
No, it's a foreign policy position. That's true.
It's a position, yes.
No, it's a foreign policy position. But you're asking what?
Of a country.
Foreign policy position of a political party. And if it's a governing political party, and that's the common conversation we're talking about. It's about democracy.
Yes.
You would say that, what would UPC do if it was in government? Would we have gone to Somalia? Of course, we would not have gone to Somalia. Meaning, we would not have accepted. We would have rejected Americans' call to come to us to use Ugandan children to go and die on behalf of America in Somalia in exchange of money, which money will not go ahead and help a single school, but which money may have go ahead and expand somebody's dubious ranch. Does it make sense? Yeah.
That's what you mean. Well, I do thank you. We're going to be hearing from this wonderful gentlemen. I am profoundly honored to host them in studio and hear from them. But in case you'd like to, have your say or ask a question around the NRM's, ideologies today, the 4 points that we are talking, and I'm putting that in quotes. Please do feel free to get into our comment section that is on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube. We'll be glad to hear from you. Also, we will be posting up our phone line so that you can be able to call in later on in the show. Otherwise, we take a short break and we will be back right after these messages, taking it on from Charles. It's
Informative, educative, and analytical. Getting to the real issues that affect an ordinary individual in areas of leadership, governance, social, and economy. The truth, the lies, and politics